So what I want to do is, really cover three things with you today. One is really what's happening with cloud and how it impacts IT. I think it's a really fundamental shift. And then I'll talk a little bit about, to deliver cloud service to IT, to enterprises. What are the capabilities that are required? They're very different from doing consumer cloud services, which I did a lot of that at Microsoft, but enterprise cloud is quite different. And then of course I'll talk about ServiceNow a little bit, explain how we fit into the picture. So obviously many of you are familiar with this evolution of technology. Maybe a few of us here were around in the mainframe age. Not that many, but I remember when I went to university. By the way, I went to the University of Lund. Anyone knows where Lund is? Sweden, yeah, that's right. That's where I grew up. I remember, punch cards, and you would, drop in the punch cards, come back the next day, and turn out that one of the cards had flipped, so you had to rerun the batch, come back the next day. The world has certainly changed a lot since then. In the 80s, we saw the, implementation of mini computers, with digital equipment being one of the leaders, but many more players. And then, of course, client server, I think, is probably had much bigger impact. In the 90s, many of us were, part of that. Certainly, that was the era when, companies like Oracle and Microsoft and Sun really became dominant in industry. But the change continued to move forward, and mid 90s to early 2000, we saw the impact of internet computing with Java. A lot of consumer online services really started to revolutionize how we use computing every day. But I think there's no doubt in my mind that cloud computing, which in some ways is very much inspired by what happened in the internet consumer world in the early 2000s, is going to have the most fundamental impact on business computing. There's really no doubt about that at all. As this technology evolution has happened, IT has changed quite a bit. I remember my first job in IT was about 20 years ago. 20 years ago, IT was sort of more of a way for a company to differentiate from the competition. It was sort of a nice to have. It was a way to get ahead of other businesses in your segment. But obviously, IT today has taken on a whole new level of importance. There's not a company nearly in the world that can even operate without IT. You go from companies like Walmart to Amazon, obviously. Even local grocery store today cannot operate without IT technology. So as this technology evolution is happening, IT has sort of become at the forefront. Business cannot operate today without IT. But the reality is, and I certainly felt this when I ran IT for Microsoft, is IT's a tough business, and the change is accelerating. The change of business is much faster today than it was 10, 15 years ago. But IT is sort of trapped in what we call infrastructure-centric management. Most IT organizations spend 70-80% of their time and resource just managing the infrastructure. But the reality is, what are the consumers of IT, the internal departments? What do they care about? They don't really care about where the servers are run. They don't really care about who's managing the servers. They care about the service level, the business service they're providing. So this is a very, very fundamental change that cloud computing now enables, to essentially take IT from a infrastructure-centric view. We all have our server huggers. I used to be one myself. But really, that's not how IT is going to be successful in the future. We see sort of a very fundamental shift from infrastructure-centric IT to service-centric IT. So with that sort of introduction, let me talk a little bit about ServiceNow as a company. ServiceNow is a SaaS player for IT. We provide both SaaS and platform services. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. The company was founded in 2004 and essentially has doubled revenue every year since inception. So a pretty remarkable growth story. I joined the company about 20 months ago. And when I joined, we were about 300 plus employees. Today, 18 months later, we are over 1,300 employees. So kind of gives you a kind of flavor for sort of the growth of our company and certainly a growth in SaaS and cloud computing for IT today. The company is really focused on enterprises, large companies, mid-sized companies, certainly universities, pharmaceutical companies, financial companies. We have some of the largest pharmas, financials, government agencies on our platform today. Let me explain a little bit what ServiceNow does, and I think a little bit of history here is going to be useful. As I mentioned, the company was founded in 2004 by a gentleman by the name of Fred Luddy. And Fred Luddy, prior to forming ServiceNow, he was a CTO of a company called Peregrine Systems. So this was one of the client server players in the 90s, the boom days. And I'm not sure anyone familiar with Peregrine Systems. So that was IT help desk on-premise client server application. When Fred left Peregrine to form ServiceNow, what he really set out to do was to build a rapid application development platform. So the vision for ServiceNow is to build a platform that allows the non-programmer to very quickly build meaningful applications. Of course, today we call that citizen developers. That's a term that Gartner has sort of coined. Enabling the citizen developer to build meaningful applications. So that was the vision. Now, of course, back in 2004, 2005, companies didn't buy platform. So in order to sort of showcase the platform aspects, we didn't have Amazon or Windows Azure at that time. To showcase the platform aspects of the platform, we built a suite of IT service management applications run in a SaaS model. And that was basically because Fred came from Peregrine. He understood IT very, very well. So that was a perfect example of how to showcase the power of the application development platform. So that's the initial suite of applications we shipped, modeled after IDLE, processes, incident, problem, change, traditional service management, service help desk kind of functions. Now, over time, the suite of SaaS applications on the platform has broadened, particularly in IT business management. So these are things that the CIO really cares about, things like IT cost, IT resource management. We got an application out there called GRC, which is regulation and compliance. Every public company in North America is under heavy regulation, SOX regulation, and other type of regulations. We have application in the platform that helps you manage through your compliance efforts. And then over time, we're now also getting into what we call IT operations management. I think there's a very clear synergy between help desk and service management and the people that run the data centers. For instance, if you have an alarm off a server in the data center, typically what you want to do is to create an incident in your service management suite off of that alarm. So we really believe in sort of a very broad suite of applications that not only do IT service management, which is based on the introduction you made, is kind of what we're known for, but we actually believe we're much broader than IT service management. We're investing quite heavily in IT business management functions as well as IT operations management. Underneath all of this sits this programmable platform that I started out talking about, and this is really the power of ServiceNow. It's very easy to either modify one of the applications we ship as part of the suite, or actually build your own standalone applications on top of the same platform. So, latest count, we had well over 60% of ServiceNow's customers have built custom applications on our PaaS platform. And some of these applications have nothing to do with IT at all. It's things like real estate management, things like HR case management. And typically these applications have one thing in common. They're about service requests. So you think about, the world in IT where you either want to order something, a new laptop, or something's broken and you need help. Well, pretty much every other business, in real estate, in HR, in field services, have the same type of nature. It's about service request management. So these type of idle processes actually translate incredibly well to other aspects of business. And we have many great implementations and great examples of that. If you're familiar with CERN, the nuclear research city in, I think it's Geneva. Yeah, it's Geneva, right? Essentially, they have a whole city built around their accelerator and associated research, and that whole city is essentially managed on ServiceNow. And if you go up on our website, you'll see a great example of how it's used for facilities and tons of other emergency management. I got in facilities, I got a broken chair, I need a new chair, broken desk, or I need something new. It's all, it all feels and looks like IT service management. So we have many examples, over 1,000 applications like that have sort of grown beyond core IT. So that's ServiceNow's role. Now I'm going to sort of get into a little bit of the technical, meat of the presentation. And I kind of mentioned how, cloud computing today in many ways was inspired by kind of what happened in online consumer with companies like Facebook and eBay building massively scalable online cloud services. I certainly was part of building that at Microsoft with things like Hotmail and Messenger, services that serve hundreds of millions of customers. But the reality is, being massively scalable doesn't mean necessarily that you meet the needs of an enterprise. So these kind of classes of clouds, we call them consumer clouds, are great for large audiences, hundreds of millions of customers, but not really tuned for the security and reliability aspects of an enterprise service. The second class of cloud services that we think about is departmental clouds. And this is where companies like Salesforce.com got started. These type of cloud services are really optimized for departments. So, Salesforce got started by selling around IT, into the sales organization. Same thing with Workday. It's tuned for, HR management, selling around IT. So again, not really built for the broader needs of the enterprise. And that's kind of where we see what we call enterprise clouds. Enterprise clouds are really designed to support all of the enterprise. It has very high requirements for security, compliance, etc. And there are very few services today that I would classify as true enterprise class clouds. And what I'd like to do now is sort of go a little deeper and provide our definition or my definition of what constitutes an enterprise cloud. So I really think about 6 key characteristics of an enterprise grade cloud, and I'll talk about each of them in a little bit more detail. Obviously, security is at the forefront. When we think about enterprises, I mentioned we got some of the largest financial institutions in the world on ServiceNow, some of the largest pharmaceuticals, government agencies. They all have one thing in common. They're some of the most highly regulated companies and industries in the world. Security is at the forefront, of every discussion with a new customer in financials and pharma. So that's kind of where every discussion starts. I'll talk a little bit about data isolation, why we think that's important. Compliance sort of goes hand in hand with security and very important for regulated enterprises. And industry-specific requirements is really about building a cloud service that can meet unique needs of pharma, retail, and those type of industries. Data sovereignty is the next area. Data sovereignty is really about where you place data around the world. When I got started in cloud computing, there was very tight regulation around where you could place data to serve customers in, say, Switzerland and Germany. And we all thought that over time, with normalization of EU and standardization of compliance standards, that these barriers would break down. But the reality is they still exist. So we'll talk about what we're doing to address that. And finally, high service availability. IT, as I mentioned before, has become absolutely mission critical to the survival of the enterprise. So if you really want to build an enterprise class cloud service, you got to be up all the time. Downtime is simply not acceptable. So let's talk about security a little bit. I think you all, read the press. There's no question that the area of cybersecurity, the number of attacks have increased over the last year. Some of these are clearly state-sponsored by foreign governments who want to disrupt the economic impact. And an evolution here. I actually have a very interesting discussion with someone who's really deep in security a couple of weeks ago. And one theory is, these cyber attacks against, say, financial institutions, for instance, denial of service attacks, are really meant to exhaust the energy of the bank's security team. Right, so they're under heavy denial of service attack, days on end, and they're so busy fending off the denial of service attack that they don't notice at the same time someone's trying to get in on the back door and get access to their data. So the whole area around cybersecurity has become incredibly important, and as an enterprise class cloud provider, we got to be best in class and really make significant investments in cybersecurity. We talk about, obviously I don't want to talk about our security architecture in detail, but as an enterprise class cloud provider, we implement firewalls, intrusion detection systems, sort of best in class security architecture. All traffic in and out of our cloud is encrypted. We think that's a very, very important characteristic of a true enterprise class security architecture. The other thing you see there in the middle, I think is quite important to a world-class security architecture. Every one of these devices, intrusion detection systems, firewalls, routers, all send their logs to a central logging system. It's not enough to just build your defense in-depth security architecture. You got to have people constantly looking at what's going on the network, looking at correlation between activity on your firewalls and your routers, and looking for suspect patterns. This area around security monitoring and building advanced algorithms to detect these threats, I think is a key area around where security needs to go in terms of technology. So clearly an area we're investing heavily in. Hand in hand with security is something I call data isolation. And this is actually a very unique architecture that's implemented by ServiceNow. And essentially, when you talk to CIOs and IT leaders about the cloud, and you ask them kind of what they like about the cloud, well, they like rapid provisioning, low operating costs, fast time to market, easy to scale up and down, very quick to build a new application. Those are all things people love about cloud computing. But then when you ask them, what are the things they don't like about cloud? You often hear, well, we don't know where our data is. Is our data intermingled with other customers' data? We really worried about security. So security and data isolation keeps coming up. So what we've done at ServiceNow is to build an architecture that isolates each customer's data logically from other customers' data. We call it a multi-instance architecture, and as you can see here, essentially what it means is each customer's data on the back end sits in its own logical database. Each customer's application sits in Java virtual machines that are horizontally scalable. So essentially, when you build your application on ServiceNow, you're logically isolated both at the application and data level from other customers. But then people ask, well, what about cost efficiency? So what we've done there is, while you're logically isolated from a software perspective, you still share common hardware. So in a way, you probably heard the debate about single tenant versus multi-tenant. So if you think about our architecture, we're multi-tenant at the logical level, at the physical level, but single tenant at the logical level where it sort of really matters. That's where we isolate one customer from another customer. And then essentially we use the same architecture to scale from very small customers to very large customers by just increasing the size of the backend database, logical database. So, in the case of small customers, we may have up to 12 customers sharing the same physical hardware, and then scaling up to the largest customers, they're the single user on the physical machine. So a very simple and effective approach to both providing data isolation and very simple scalability from small to large customers. In my experience, the simpler you build your architecture, the better reliability and scalability you get. So let me talk about compliance. That obviously goes hand in hand with security, and you can tell your customers that you're secure, but you actually have to prove it, and compliance strategies are a great way to do that. It's an area we've implemented quite a bit into, and as you can see, these compliance standards goes across industry. I mentioned that many of our customers are highly regulated, and one thing I learned after joining ServiceNow is pharmaceuticals are probably the most highly regulated industry in the world. So they operate under FDA regulation, and essentially what that means is every single change to the environment has to be logged and has to be auditable. So we've implemented compliance standards that meets FDA regulations. Just to mention a couple here, PCI DSS is for financial services, payment card industry. We have our ISO 27001, which is an internationally recognized security standard. And then finally, a couple months ago, we achieved FISMA moderate government-wide authority to operate, which is essentially required to sell cloud to U.S. Federal government. So as you can see, in order to meet the needs of different industry verticals, industry segments, you have to meet different compliance standards. And the challenge is to run them all on a common platform. Want to talk about data sovereignty. I mentioned that before. We're a small company still. We don't own our own data centers. Instead, we decided to partner with data center operators. And essentially inside their data centers, we have our own colo environment, where we manage everything from biometrics, access control, fiber connectivity, internet connectivity, all aspects of operation is managed by ServiceNow. So it looks and feels like it's our own data center, but without the overhead of owning the physical facility. So as you can see here, we have data centers around the world, and that's really to address these data sovereignty requirements. For instance, we have a pair of data centers in Switzerland, and as you can imagine, under Swiss banking law, there's strict restrictions on kind of what type of data can leave the country. So to address that, we try to be very nimble and build two small data centers that are technically identical to our other data centers, but inside the borders of Switzerland. As you can see, for similar reasons, we have two data centers in Canada. Although, to my knowledge, I don't think Canadian data regulatory laws are as strict as Switzerland. There are needs to have, for certain industry verticals, to have data centers in Canada. So we continue to kind of operate like this, be very nimble, and enter new markets to kind of address these type of data sovereignty requirements. Finally, we talked about the IT being, a mission critical function of the business. As you saw in the previous picture, all our data centers come in pairs, and there's a reason for that, because on top of these paired data centers, we've implemented something called advanced high availability. And this is a fairly technical picture, but just to summarize, the way it works is each customer's production instance is deployed in two of these mirrored data centers. So, East Coast US, West Coast US, Toronto, Montreal. And then essentially what we do is provision the customers in mirrored pairs, and then we do near real-time data replication. So anytime that change happens on the primary side, it's replicated to the mirrored side. And then using our own automation platform, we built a set of automation that helps us to very quickly, should there be a server outage, a network outage, or a broader problem in the primary data center, quickly fail over the customer to the alternate data center. We also use this technology for maintenance activity. So to limit the impact of, say, a security patch or general upgrade of, say, the network infrastructure, we proactively fail over the customer to the alternate data center, so we can perform the maintenance without impacting the customer. So with this type of technology and sort of focus on availability, kind of what you see on the graph here is our actual performance in availability across over 1,600 customers on the platform today. So our SLA is at 99.8%, which is actually higher than most SaaS providers. But as you can see, using these type of HA technologies, we're actually operating at near 4 nines availability. And as you can see, the graph is going up, very, very gradually, month over month. And if you've been in this business, for a while, you kind of understand when you get to 3 nines and above, every single, hundredths of a percentage availability improvement just takes enormous effort. So, we're firm believers in automation. We really think that's how to run the cloud. That's the only way to scale out. And we've essentially automated all our own operational processes, like provisioning a new customer. From the time a contract is signed and a customer is up and running in our data centers, it takes a couple hours. It's completely automated from order entry to customer being up and running. So clearly having a lights out, zero touch approach to running data centers is really fundamental to cloud. But it really goes beyond data center operations. It's also quite relevant to service operations, and we think about sort of the notion of disintermediation. So this is a typical IT process today. Something's broken, or you need, say you need an IP phone. If you think about most phones today are IP based. So you think about an IP phone. Well, what is it? Well, it's partly a phone. It's partly a network device. It's partly a computer. And so that means multiple departments need to be coordinated to make that IP phone come alive, right? You've got to have an IP address, got to be connected to the network, needs to be provisioned to the backend server, needs to be physically provisioned and configured. And so these are the typical, in the legacy world, that's why it takes so long today to get anything delivered from IT, because you have all these handoffs on the back end, very isolated, siloed type of approaches to IT. But with automation, we see what we call disintermediation. You go from a service request portal in ServiceNow, very similar to Amazon, and you request help or you request a new device, and you go straight through the approval process. All the steps are automated to provisioning. We really think, if you think about IT, I think there's a fundamental change happening within IT. The role of that CIO is going from infrastructure management, which we think today probably consumes 70–80% of IT's time and resources, to service and business management. At the end of the day, your customers care about the business value you're providing. As I mentioned, they don't really care as much about what servers do you have, who's managing them, what tools do you use to manage the service. We think there's an incredible opportunity for the CIO and IT to kind of regain the leadership again. As I mentioned, back in 20 years ago when I started in IT, the technical innovation, the vision for technology came from the CIO. And then over time, sort of shifted to cost optimizations, cost cutting, infrastructure management. I think the move to cloud is really an incredible opportunity for IT to regain the leadership again. And there are three elements to this. One is consolidate. Divisions, consolidate functions, provide a single point of IT service, shared services. Consumerize the experience through self-service portals. Make it very easy for your users within the enterprise to request a service from IT. And then to expedite the delivery of that service, heavy investment in automation. And really, we see that as the future IT. By getting out of infrastructure management, by automating and using the cloud, IT can keep up with the speed of business. So that's very, very high level, kind of the vision of cloud from ServiceNow. I think we've got 10 minutes for questions. So let's open it up. Or comments. Or anyone disagrees with the world of cloud? I'd love to hear about it.
You talked a little bit about
How do we integrate with enterprises that?
Identity management.
Great. So the question was, how do we integrate with identity management? Most of our enterprise customers, use their own internal either Active Directory or LDAP infrastructure. So essentially, we have the capability to redirect the authentication to your on-premise LDAP or AD infrastructure. So most of our customers use that type of mechanism today.
SAML?
We support SAML 2.0 as well, so SAML 2.0, LDAP. We do support local authentication, but virtually none of our customers are using that. So it's SAML 2.0, LDAP type of capabilities. Yes.
Can you compare the sort of logical isolation that you have to sort of isolation that you might get in an AWS VM?
AWS is not my area of expertise, but obviously you can within AWS provision your own database.
Sort of.
Amazon, Azure is one area I'm obviously very familiar with since I was part of building it. And you kind of have two approaches at AWS. You can provision your own VM and manage your own storage, so you can spin up a MySQL database as storage. But when you use their storage subsystem, it's typically a shared storage infrastructure, meaning that all data is intermingled. If you look at Azure storage, for instance. And obviously the data is key, but you can't really point to a single machine or a single logical entity and say, that's where my data is. So there's a very fundamental difference between this type of data isolation and Azure data storage or Amazon data storage. And the same thing with Salesforce. So there's a very big difference between a shared storage substrate and just isolated storage.
An organization that has fairly mature incident change problem service request processes. How does you take the existing processes, even what's the process that change your processes into ServiceNow's tools?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, first of all, I would say that you don't have to change your processes. ServiceNow is very, very flexible. It's obviously built around IDLE. One of the hallmarks of a true cloud platform is we're not forcing anyone into a specific process. That's what general SaaS platforms do. Like Workday is a good example. But a true enterprise class platform like ServiceNow gives you a very, very high degree of control to define your own processes the way you want them to work. And you can even modify, our incident from change applications to meet your needs. And you do it at very, very high level through simple configurations. If you want to go really deep, you can do it at JavaScript level. But the whole notion is based on, we have a foundational set of applications, but you tailor the platform to your specific needs.
How do the roles change when you go from an infrastructure-centric IT organization to a business-centric organization?
That's a great question that I get asked a lot. How does IT evolve and the staffing model evolve when you go from infrastructure-centric to service-centric? And as we looked at sort of the change from mainframe to minis to client server to internet to cloud, I mean, the thing we have to realize is these things don't play out in 1 or 2 years. These are sort of long-term trends that typically take 10 to 15 years. I'll give you a great example is some of our customers, large enterprises have 4,000 to 5,000 IT applications. You're not going to move them to the cloud overnight. So the first thing to remember is this is a gradual shift that's going to play out over time. We do think, I think at least, the jobs in IT are going to get much more interesting. It's going to be much more about providing business value. I do think software and automation will come to the forefront. Instead of managing automation on your server, you'll be managing the automation of the application and the service request forms. So I think software will be at the center of sort of the future skill set, understanding the business, what does the business need versus sort of focusing on infrastructure. So I think IT leaders really need to think today about what is their staffing model going to look like 4, 5, 6 years from now, and sort of set those changes in motion. But I personally think it's going to be a huge benefit for IT. The jobs will be sort of up-leveled, will be more business value. So I think personally, I think IT is going to be more exciting in the next decade than it ever been before.
Fortunately, we're out of time. If you have any questions, I guess you'll stay a few minutes more.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.